Hello students, this is teacher Mpendo Cosmas from Namgongo Secondary and Vocational School, taking you through a biology lesson specifically for senior 2 class. The main objectives of this lesson is that I want every student, whichever you're watching from, to put the following as our main objectives for this lesson. The very first one is that first of all we're going to look at leaf modification as a topic. So I want you to have the following in your mind, so that by the end of this lesson you are in a position to find out the meaning of the term modification. That is one objective that you must achieve by the end of this lesson. The other second one is that I want to make sure, or you should make sure, that by the end of this lesson you are in position to identify the different modes of leaf modification. Then you must be also in position to know the ecological importance or relevancy of the different types of leaf modifications. So let's begin. The very first objective that we've said. What is modification? What does the word modification mean? If someone talks about the word modification, the word modification or the term modification refers to the change in structure of an organism. Since we are dealing with biology, we shall basically much emphasize living things, and here we shall be using the word organism. So here modification, we shall be meaning the change in the structure of an organism. And why is the structure of an organism changing? It is changing for a purpose, in order for that particular structure to perform a particular function. So modification is essential for enabling organisms suit in order to perform some specific function. So we are going to see, specifically for leaves, we are going to see that there are different modes of leaf modification. So we're going to see that leaves are changing they are changing their structures with the aim of performing some particular functions. Like we are going to see that how have they changed their structure. This modification may refer to an organism or an organism changing in shape. So we are going to see that modification may result into the organism changing its shape. They can refer to the organism changing its arrangement. These are the different terms which brings about modification. They can find arrangement. They can differ in numbers. The numbers can vary, whereby maybe initially they used to be 1, and now the number keeps on increasing for them to perform a particular function. So we are going to see how these leaves be modified. But before we go into the details, I want to first go back a little and understand. We all know that leaves are essentially known, which we can call the so-called the primary functions of leaves, because we've already seen that modification is coming about in order for the organism to perform a particular function. So the functions of leaves, we can classify them into two. We have the primary functions and the secondary functions. The primary function, those are the ones which is expected of any leaf. What is any leaf expected of? The primary function of a leaf is, one of them is that they act as cells for photosynthesis, or they manufactures food for a plant. That is one of the primary function of leaves. They act as cells for photosynthesis. a plant manufacture its fruit is one of the primary functions of any leaf. Any leaf is expected to, whenever you say leaf, you expect that there are photosynthetic organs. Then the other function of the leaves, which is primary, is that they act as areas for transpiration. They act as sites for transpiration. Transpiration, that is the actual site for which a plant loses its excess water, and we shall go into detail. We shall see the relevance of why plants lose their excess water. There are some other importance. Then the other function is that they act as sites for gaseous exchange. These are all primary functions because of the presence of stomata. These are primary functions of this. But now we are going to see that instead of these leaves performing these so-called primary functions, these leaves have gone ahead and they have adopted, or they have changed their structure, and they are performing some other extra functions which are outside this. And those functions are the one we are calling leaf modifications. They are the ones we are calling the leaf modifications, or you can call them the secondary functions of leaves. Secondary functions of leaves. For example, here we can say that you came to school, or you must have gone to school, and one of the primary reasons for you coming to school is that is the academic part of it. But when you reach school, you will find there are some other activities. You will join the maybe welfare club, you will find you have joined maybe prefectorial body, maybe you are doing some other activities. So it doesn't stop you from achieving the primary function, but you are doing these ones as secondary functions of you coming to school. So what are those different ways for how leaves have been modified themselves? So there are quite many. There are several modes for which schools and then leaves have modified themselves in order to perform some particular function. And the very first one is reproduction. So you may see that we are all familiar that reproduction should be essential. The importance should be the very role of seeds. But we are going to see here that there are some leaves who have changed their structures in order for them to reproduce. For example, the very common one, the very first example is the bryophyllum, leaves. The bryophyllum leaf is a structure which you must have seen, you must be watching it on your screen there. This is a leaf which has gotten some so-called, I can call them buds. It's a leaf of this nature. Maybe use a simple representation here, or you are having it on your screen for further details. So this is a true leaf, like another leaf can look like. It is having all the parts, but when you try to check, it is having all the parts, just the mid-rim, they are all there, the structures are all there. But in its lamina, it has gotten the so-called notches. These ones I can easily call them notches. So in the notches is where you find the sprouting plants. We call them the sprouting plants. This one. There are some kind of a leaf which is emerging. This one is what we are calling a sprouting plant. Or you can call them, you can call it the bulbs, or you can call them the bulbs. So the bulb, this one, when this leaf matures, or when it reaches maturity, and this leaf branches off, or it breaks off from the main plant, this younger plant here, sprouting plant is a younger plant, is capable of again emerging into an independent plant. So this one is common amongst those so-called, there is a plant species known as the bryophyllum. So every part that qualifies to be a leaf, they are all there, but in its veins, they are sprouting plants, or they are bulbs, which are capable of emerging into another independent plant. we can go to the next slide and say another form of modification. So that is one which we can see. We've seen that there are some leaves which are modified purposely for reproduction. Then another modification which we can also think of, that leaves have gone ahead to deviate from the other usual primary functions of the leaf, is the so-called scale leaves. The scale leaves, these are leaves which are normally found amongst the underground stems. When I talk of the underground stems, this is where we find the onions, we have there the raisins. In the raisins is where we shall have the grass, scotch grass, is where we shall have, we also have there the garlics. The so-called leaf, I will use the onions, the one which we are familiar with. When you are opening an onion bulb at home, there are some leaves which we scratch off. Those are the ones I'm calling the what? The scale leaves. And we describe the scale leaf as being the thin, dry, membranous structure, usually brown in color, and sometimes colorless in some other plant species. And their major role, they are essentially responsible for protecting the axillary, buds. Axillary buds mean that when they are not given protection, they can easily be broken off. So they protect them against mechanical injuries, so that they cannot easily dry out. So those are the so-called scale leaves. They are leaves purposely responsible for protecting axillary buds. They are found in there. Then the other modification that we shall see amongst leaves is some leaves which have been modified for nutrition. We have leaves which can do the physical feeding. This one is common amongst the so-called insectivorous plants. This one is found amongst the so-called insectivorous plants. So these are such types of leaves are found in plants which normally grow in nitrogen deficient soils. And nitrogen deficient soils are normally characterized by waterlogged conditions. So they are not the usual plant species that I can easily allocate for you, that you find it this way, because they are normally found in such areas. So these so-called insectivorous plants, how do they get access to? Why do they feed on insects? Because the word goes, they are insectivorous, meaning that they are plants that feed on insects. They feed on insects. Why are they feeding on insects? Like I've said, that these so-called plants, they are normally found in conditions or in soils that lack nitrogen. So if they lack nitrogen, how do they get? Because nitrogen is an essential mineral element. It is a macro element, meaning that it is required by the plants in large quantities, because we believe nitrogen is the one which is used by the plant to manufacture chlorophyll. It is also responsible for the green vegetation in cover, and it is also responsible for some other activities. So meaning that when plants are in such soils, how do they get access to nitrogen? So these plants, what do they do? These plants have gotten leaves which have been modified to capture, like you are seeing on the example structure you are seeing on your screen there. They have gotten leaves which have gotten, I can call them the mouth-like structures. They have gotten mouth-like structures on their leaves. So, and again, not only having the mouth-like structures, their leaves again, they have been made colored. They have gotten colored leaves. Their leaves are colored. Why are their leaves colored? They tend to take on the role of flowers, in that they tend to attract all insects to get confused, and they assume they are flowers. So when going there thinking they are flowers, they feel trapped. They have gotten traps. They have gotten what? Traps. So when the insects comes, these leaves will close suddenly. They close suddenly together with the insect inside. And the insect will be killed from inside. And we all know that when the insect is killed from inside, they start releasing nitrogenous products. So the nitrogenous products will now start to be absorbed within the plant's body, and that's how they get access to nitrogen. They first capture insects. Insects comes like they have come to take nectar, because they have said that the leaves are colored. So when they come, they will be trapped from inside, because inside not only opening suddenly, but also their inside has gotten a sticky substance. So when an insect lands inside, it becomes very hard for that insect to run away or to escape. So this one is common amongst the examples of such plants. We have what we call the venous trap. We have the venous trap. Like I said, they are not common here. We have what we call the bladderworts. We have many examples. They are not common here, and these are examples. You will not commonly find them on your way there, but they are specifically found in some other areas. Then the other modification that we can also think of, that is the fourth one, is the so-called leaf spines. The leaf spines. What are leaf spines? The leaf spines, these are sharp, pointed structures which are commonly found in some or in certain plants. They are commonly found in certain plants, and they are normally responsible for defense. They are commonly responsible for defense. So since they are spines, like I said, they are sharp pointed, they try to protect these so-called plants against the so-called browsers. The browsers, these are grazing animals. So when these grazers come, like they want to feed on them, these plants, they use their spines and they pierce the animal, and the animal automatically will do what? Will take off. So in the process, the organism gets protected in the environment where it stays. Those are some of the ecological components. Then also spines are characteristic of the so-called xerophytes. Xerophytes, these are desert plants, plants which normally grow in desert areas. So how do they protect themselves? That they are mainly responsible there for reducing excessive water conservation. Here they perform the role of water conservation. Remember, the biggest challenge of plants that grows in the desert is to conserve water, because they have limited supply of water. If they have a shortage of water, how do they if they have very large leaves, it means that all their water is to be lost into the atmosphere during transpiration. So what do these plants do? They have instead lost the normal leaves, and instead they have gotten modified leaves which have changed structure into spines, inside that they reduce the surface area for transpiration. And then the other modification number next is the leaf tendrils. Leaf tendrils, these are slender, or you can call them wire-like coiled structures. They are normally found amongst the climbing plants or the climbers. And what are they doing there? They are essentially responsible for giving support. Normally, these leaves these plants with the leaf tendrils, they are normally found amongst the plants with weak stems, meaning that they cannot support themselves. So they need to seek for support from some other plants. So these plants have got their leaves which have been modified into tendrils, and the tendrils are for climbing some other plants. So I want to stop here for tonight. We shall meet in the next segment. This remains teacher Mpendo Cosmas from Namukongo Secondary and Vocational School.